Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in British history. During her 70-year reign, Her Majesty witnessed a record 14 US presidents.
In memory of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who in death my people still mourn.
You, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
I, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
From the end of World War II to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Elizabethan age saw great changes to American society. Some presidents flourished, others faltered in the face of division and uncertainty. But Queen Elizabeth II remained a constant symbol of hope and duty. This is Elizabeth and the Presidents. On the 12th of April 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt suffered a massive brain hemorrhage whilst sitting for a portrait in Georgia. The wartime leader passed away at the age of 63, and Vice President Harry S. Truman assumed the role of president the very same day. At the time, World War II was still ongoing for Europe and the United States. The major task of leading the world to peace now landed in Truman's hands. As Vice President, FDR had kept Truman in the dark about the Manhattan Project. With victory in Europe Day on the 8th of May 1945, Truman urgently needed to end the war with Japan and bring peace to the world. However, the Japanese refused to surrender. Truman now faced a choice that would change modern warfare forever.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
On August 6, 1945, the US dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb landed on Nagasaki. Over 120,000 people died from the attacks, and many more suffered radiation poisoning.
Received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
A new wave of cruelty and devastation ended the war. Elizabeth II first met Harry S. Truman as a princess. In 1951, Elizabeth visited the United States on her father's behalf and hosted the president at the Canadian Embassy.
Desmond and I thank you for this welcome to Washington. Seeing so many of you here brings home to us in a vivid way the vast scale of the press, radio, television and newsreels of this country.
Without knowing it, however, her time as queen would come sooner rather than later, and the young princess would encounter many more meetings with presidents over the coming years. Only a few months after meeting President Truman, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, passed away at Sandringham on the 6th of February 1952.
For the Queen, his daughter, the widowed Queen, his wife, and Princess Margaret, the great ordeal begins. The imperial crown, with its 3,000 jewels, glints in the fitful light as George VI returns to his sorrowing capital. And with it, on the oak coffin, is the white wreath of his widow. 15 years ago, he walked here behind his dead father, with no thought of crown or throne, a quiet, shy man, thankful that greatness was not to be thrust upon him. But fate ruled otherwise.
Upon the monarch's death, Truman said King George VI had shared the end of his reign all the hardships and austerities which evil days imposed on the brave British people. Elizabeth II's ascension to the throne symbolized a new era of youth and peace, not just for Britain and America, but for the world as a whole. Just as the young Elizabeth II was finding her feet as queen, the American people elected a new president in November 1952, Dwight D. Eisenhower.
My grateful thanks go out to each of you for your prayers, because your prayers for divine guidance on my behalf are the greatest gift you could possibly bring to me. As your prayers came from your hearts, so there comes from mine a very earnest one, that all of us, by our combined dedication and devotion, may merit the great blessings that the Almighty has brought to this land of ours.
Eisenhower had earned the respect of the American public during World War II as Commander General of the forces in Europe. His military strengths and strategic mindset massively helped when it came to the tumultuous foreign policy issues during his presidency. In 1953, Eisenhower obtained a truce in the Korean War, bringing peace along the border of South Korea. The 34th president also worked incessantly to ease the tensions of the Cold War. The death of Stalin in the first year of Eisenhower's presidency shifted US relations with Russia. New Russian leaders consented to a peace treaty neutralizing Austria and agreed to gather around a meeting table with Western leaders in 1955. Eisenhower's negotiating powers showed a move in the right direction for world peace. Eisenhower not only sought unity across the world, but also at home. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools are inherently unequal. 3 years later, 9 African American students enrolled at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. However, the students were met with fierce attack on their rights. Governor Orville Forbes ordered the Arkansas National Guard to surround the school and keep the 9 students from entering. Forbes's move angered Eisenhower. The 34th president sent the 101st Airborne Division into Little Rock to protect the 9 students and ensure the Supreme Court's rulings were upheld.
On September 27, 1957, President Eisenhower sent 1,000 men of the United States Army to carry out the law. The Supreme Court of the United States had said, "The entire strength of the nation may be used to enforce, in any part of the land, the security of all rights entrusted by the Constitution." And that included my rights and the rights of 8 other Negro Americans who wanted to go to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. We were Terrence Roberts, Thelma Mothershed, Elizabeth Eckford, Ernest Green, Carlotta Walls, Melba Patillo, Minnie Jean Brown, and Gloria Ray. And we were going to school again.
The Little Rock crisis became world famous, and people across the globe hailed Eisenhower for standing up to racism. Dwight D. Eisenhower left office after 2 terms in 1961. His legacy remains one of making America the strongest, most influential, and most productive nation in the world. In 1961, the youngest president ever to be elected came striding through the White House doors.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Democrat John F. Kennedy became the new fresh face of American politics and promised to tackle both economic and civil rights issues. Kennedy pursued legislation to lower taxes, protect the unemployed, and increase the minimum wage. But the 35th president's compassion for the American people did not just stop with the economy. He also proposed a Civil Rights Act, which would outlaw racial segregation in public spaces. After years of being treated like second-class citizens, African Americans all over the country would finally be able to eat, sit, and work next to white Americans.
This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. It ought to be possible for American consumers of any color to receive equal service in places of public accommodation, such as hotels and restaurants and theaters and retail stores, without being forced to resort to demonstrations in the street. And it ought to be possible for American citizens of any color to register and to vote in a free election without interference or fear of reprisal. It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color.
However, the young president never managed to witness his life-changing civil rights policies put into action. On the 22nd of November 1963, JFK was assassinated as he rode in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Crowds of people had lined the streets to catch a glimpse of the president. However, at 12:30 p.m., gunshots were heard in the plaza, with bullets hitting Kennedy and the governor of Texas.
Coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I asked Joe to wave to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man, that's all right, sir. You go ahead, Charlie. As he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat, and his wife reached up toward him, and as he was slumping down, and the second shot went off, and it just knocked him down.
JFK's tragic death shocked the world. Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip had invited the Kennedys to Buckingham Palace in 1961. The news of the president's death greatly upset the royal family, and Prince Philip attended the 35th president's funeral to pay his respects. In 1965, the Queen invited Jackie Kennedy, her daughter Caroline, and son John F. Kennedy Jr. to the opening of the JFK Memorial in Runnymede, where the Magna Carta was signed in 1215. The Queen gifted an acre of the land to the American people as tribute to the charismatic president.
In memory of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who in death my people still mourn, and whom in life they loved and admired.
JFK's untimely death greatly touched Queen Elizabeth's heart. Out of respect and gratitude for his service, the monarch made sure the young president would not be forgotten in Britain. Shortly after Kennedy's assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president.
In some men, the presidency has bred greatness. They have become giants forged in the crucible of courage. Now begins a new chapter in the history of a nation grown great under the inspired leadership of great men. President Johnson faces his monumental tasks with a sense of integrity that is unquestioned, with knowledge that breeds respect, and with hope that God will guide his hand.
Johnson made sure that JFK's progressive policies were finally put into action. The 36th president enacted the new Civil Rights Bill and tax cuts Kennedy had been urging for. Johnson changed the lives of millions of people, and in 1964 he was re-elected as president with the widest popular margin in American history.
You, Lyndon Baines Johnson, do solemnly swear.
I, Lyndon Baines Johnson, do solemnly swear.
That you will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of the Presidency of the United States.
The office of the Presidency of the United States.
And will, to the best of your ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
During the 60s, relations between the United States and United Kingdom were shaky. The UK's power had weakened, and the government refused to support the US's involvement in the Vietnam War.
Why not negotiate now? So many ask me. The answer is that we and our South Vietnamese allies are wholly prepared to negotiate tonight.
Tensions between Prime Minister Harold Wilson and President Lyndon B. Johnson were therefore high. The Queen never sent an invitation to Johnson to visit Great Britain. Johnson also never invited the monarch to visit the US. Instead, the British government sent the Queen's sister and brother-in-law, Margaret and Tony, to visit the White House in 1965 for a state dinner.
We are most grateful for your kind hospitality.
Johnson thanked the Earl and Countess of Snowdon for their friendship and parted with the pair late into the night. The trip proved a success at calming any tense relations. However, government diplomats back home banned the royal couple from future visits to the US on account of their party lifestyle. Lyndon B. Johnson led the United States to a brighter future for African Americans and showed proactiveness when it came to foreign and economic policy. However, Johnson remains the only US president to not meet Queen Elizabeth II during her reign. The reason why has never been confirmed.
In May of 1991, the LBJ Library made headlines when it hosted the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, and their royal entourage during the Queen's only visit to Texas during her long reign. Earlier in the day, a crowd of about 8,000 had greeted the Queen at the state capitol, where she gave brief remarks and accepted a gift of 8 pairs of cowboy boots for her grandchildren. She then made her way to the LBJ Library, where she was joined by Lady Bird Johnson, other members of the Johnson family, Governor Ann Richards, and other dignitaries. All in all, one of the most striking moments in the library's history.
Winston Spencer Churchill died today at the age of 90. NBC News presents a special report on the man and his life. Here is NBC News correspondent Merrill Muller.
The end came at 3 a.m. New York time. It was revealed in a brief announcement from the Churchill home. This is what the announcement said, giving London time. Shortly after 8 a.m. this morning, Sir Winston Churchill died at his home. Winston Churchill died in a red brick house on a small side street opposite London's Kensington Gardens. For the last several days, the street had been cleared of newsmen and camera crews at the request of Lady Churchill. This was the scene near that street today, when news of Sir Winston's death was announced. The morning had begun as a typically London Sunday with a gentle rain, but news of the death spread quickly, and many spectators joined reporters and photographers who kept the vigil during the past 10 days. One of those who left the Churchill house in the morning after the announcement of death was his friend and longtime personal physician, Lord Moran. It was Lord Moran who had kept the world informed of the progress of Churchill's last illness. The news had been expected, but it took on an added note of reality as the handbills appeared on the streets, sorrowfully announcing the event. The activity increased about the Churchill residence. Telegrams of condolence arrived in ever-increasing numbers along with flowers, and messages were brought by diplomatic cars. All of this activity was watched by the London crowds in a hushed silence. And so ends a life that began more than 90 years ago, on the 30th of November, 1874. So ends one of the most remarkable careers of this and perhaps any other time.
position of the coffin is shown clearly by the brilliant white naval caps that go before it and behind. The Navy exercising its tradition on a sad occasion like this ever since the day when it took over the traces at the funeral of Queen Victoria, when the army horses had kicked them over. Behind the royal carriages, the town carriage first, 4 Clarences behind, which bring the most of the lady members of the Churchill family, some of the men. And walking in front of the carriages, behind the coffin, you will see 10 men in black, members of the family and close friends who are following on foot. We are moving up Whitehall, past the government buildings and towards Downing Street.
For the United States, President Johnson was, of course, unable to come. But the Secretary of State, Mr. Dean Rusk, the Chief Justice Earl Warren, the United States Ambassador are here, together with his old friend, President Eisenhower.
As the coffin passes the cenotaph, you'll see the banners of the Danish resistance being dipped before it as it goes by. This is the part of the pavement where they have their place. Royal Air Force men moving through the picture are only apprentices from Technical Training Command who have the honor of escorting the coffin. Here, the members of the family, Mr. Randolph Churchill at the front, and on his right, Winston Churchill, the grandson of the dead man, who lead as the senior male members of the family. And then you'll see Mr. Duncan Sands, Mr. Christopher Soames, Mr. Piers Dixon and Mr. Nicholas Soames, Major John Churchill, nephew of Mr. Jeremy Soames, and at the back, Mr. Montague Brown, Sir Winston's faithful secretary for more than 20 years, and Mr. Peregrine Churchill, his nephew. And now the town coach, beautiful bays drawing it, containing Lady Churchill, Lady Audley, Sarah Churchill, who is ill but has come from her bed today to her father's funeral, and Mrs. Christopher Soames, who people knew for many years as Mary Churchill, served in the ATS as a gunner during the war. Do they look perhaps for one second at the house in Downing Street where they lived?
There's been some criticism both abroad and here because Vice President Humphrey was not sent to London for the Churchill funeral. Would you care to go into your reasons and what motivated you in selecting the American delegation?
Well, at first I thought that I would hope that I would be able to go, my physical condition would permit. I asked that we defer final decision until the doctors could act, but I had my staff contact President Truman and President Eisenhower and expressed the hope that they could accompany me. President Truman was unable to go, and President Eisenhower informed us that he had accepted the invitation of the family, and he would be going, and that he would be in attendance and would be doing other things there. I urged that he go with us and our delegation and sent a plane to California to pick him up. I, at the same time, personally called the Chief Justice and asked if he would agree to go with me in case we made the trip. I also was informed that we had Senator Fulbright, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Hickenlooper, the ranking Republican of that committee, and 8 other senators in London at the time, some of whom would be paying their respects as representatives of this country. I felt that with the former president, with the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, with the distinguished ambassador of this country to the United Kingdom, that we had a good delegation and a high-ranking delegation. I had no particular reason for not asking the Vice President to go, although the Vice President, as you may or may not have observed, was addressing the delegates from 50 states at noon, the day the plane left at 7:30 in the morning, on his new responsibilities in the field of civil rights. I have glad to have the press's reactions and the reactions abroad on the protocol involved in connection with funerals. I have served as vice president for 3 years, and it had never occurred to me, and I had never had it brought to my attention so vividly that it was the duty and the function of the vice president to be present at all official funerals. On occasions, during the 3 years I was vice president, I attended 1 or 2 funerals representing this country, but there were many representatives from many walks of life. I did review the list of delegates to representing their countries at the Churchill funeral, and I did not observe that other nations sent, in most instances, either their top man or the next man necessarily. I thought we had a rather well-rounded delegation, and the former president, the Secretary of State, the senators who were present, the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. In the light of your interest and other interests, I may have made a mistake by asking the Chief Justice to go and not asking the Vice President. I will bear in mind, in connection with any future funerals, your very strong feelings in the matter, and try to act in accordance with our national interest.
In 1969, the White House switched sides. Republican nominee Richard Nixon won the presidential race and soon found himself commanding the country from the infamous Oval Office.
You, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
I, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
Nixon's best achievements came from his quest for stability.
First priority foreign policy objective of our next administration will be bring an honorable end to the war in Vietnam.
Elizabeth's fifth U.S. president withdrew troops from Vietnam, ending the U.S.'s involvement in the conflict, and reduced tensions with China and the USSR. His time in office even oversaw man's first steps on the moon in 1969.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Nixon won over the public's hearts again in the 1972 election.
Tonight, I again proudly accept that nomination for President of the United States.
But only a few months later, his era of progress and stability came crashing down. The Watergate scandal rocked headlines in America and across the world. In June, police arrested 5 men for breaking into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel in Washington. 2 of the culprits were linked to the Nixon re-election team, and questions began to arise about whether the president knew about the break-in. A year previously, Nixon had installed a tape recorder in the Oval Office. Watergate investigators demanded that the 37th president hand over what came to be known as the Nixon tapes to prove whether he had ordered the break-in or tried to cover it up. Nixon refused. 2 years later, President Nixon faced 3 articles of impeachment: obstruction of justice, failure to comply, and misuse of power.
I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Well, he sure did wash his hands of a lot. Even assuming responsibility, I don't know.
It was a sympathy call. He did a sympathy call back in the 60s, and he didn't do it then for people that didn't believe him, and I guess he didn't do it for me anyway.
To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
It has never been proven whether Nixon ordered the break-in, but the release of the tapes revealed the president did try to use the CIA to block the FBI's investigations. Richard Nixon ultimately burnt down the trust between the American people and the government. Watergate changed US politics forever.
In the beginning, I asked you to pray for me. Before closing, I ask again your prayers for Richard Nixon and for his family. May our former president, who brought peace to millions, find it for himself.
Upon Nixon's resignation, Vice President Gerald Ford swore the oath of office in the East Room of the White House. Gerry Ford was an honest and open man with integrity. More than anything, he wanted to heal the country's wounds and end the people's hurt after Watergate. The Fords quickly became a favorite first family for Americans across the country. The hugely popular First Lady, Betty Ford, spoke candidly on many issues.
You are looking at the pattern of discrimination which must be ended before women are truly free. Freedom for women to be what they want to be will help complete the circle of freedom America has been striving for 200 years.
Both Betty and her daughter Susan won over women across America on many occasions. However, in 1974, Ford made a very controversial move.
Gerald R. Ford, President of the United States, pursuant to the pardon power conferred upon me by Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon for all offenses against the United States which he, Richard Nixon, has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from July 20, 1969 through August 9, 1974.
The decision broke public trust in Ford's integrity. His presidency was forever tarnished. In 1976, America's first family invited Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip to the White House. The occasion marked 200 years of American independence, and the two leaders joined together on American soil to celebrate the bicentennial.
The British and American people are as close today as two peoples have ever been. We see you as our strong and trusted friend, and we believe that you in turn will find us as ready as ever to bear our full share in defending the values in which we both believe.
The Queen and Prince Philip joined the Fords at a celebratory state dinner. Prince Philip managed to catch a dance with a glamorous First Lady later in the evening, and many laughs were shared. The iconic moment, however, came when Gerald Ford invited the monarch onto the floor. The two leaders graciously swayed around the room together, and the moment soon symbolized the country's unwavering friendship. In 1976, Democrat Jimmy Carter defeated Ford in the US elections and knocked the Republican Party off the top seat.
Let us learn together and laugh together and work together and pray together, confident that in the end we will triumph together in the right.
Elizabeth II's seventh president was a moral and religious man, not very well known outside of the state of Georgia. However, he faced massive economic challenges from day one of his office. The 39th president created a compassionate government. Carter worked hard to combat soaring inflation and unemployment and widespread energy shortages across the country.
No one likes gasoline rationing, and we will avoid it if it is possible. But I will not hide from my responsibility to the nation.
By the end of his administration, he decreased the budget deficit and increased jobs by nearly 8 million. Carter also put a record number of women, blacks and Hispanics in government jobs. His drive for a more equal America started right at the top. The president not only faced domestic issues, but also problems abroad. In 1979, 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage after a group of militarized Iranian students took over the US embassy in Tehran. The Iran hostage crisis dominated the final 14 months of Carter's presidency.
Mr. President, following up on your statement just now, when you were planning the rescue attempt, did you believe that all the hostages could have been removed from Iran safely, or did you feel that some could have been killed in the process?
Republican opponent Ronald Reagan massively criticized the president's handling of the crisis, and it soon became a point of contention for voters.
My criticism, I don't mind criticizing what has been done. And frankly, I don't think the president has done anything that he couldn't have done 5 months ago.
After 444 days, Iran finally released the 52 Americans the same day Carter left office and Reagan was inaugurated. A political underdog, Carter was an honest and decent leader, but he lacked the time or circumstances to meet voters' high expectations. It is only now that many Americans appreciate Jimmy Carter's hard work and grace. In 1980, Ronald Reagan's dream of reaching the highest office in the land came true. Reagan won a decisive victory, claiming 44 states and 489 electoral votes. The Reagan era came crashing through the doors of the White House, and nothing could stand in its way. Ronald Reagan developed a set of neoliberal reforms named Reaganomics, which pushed for lower taxes, deregulation, and free trade.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
The economic plan removed major government interference. However, Reagan's reforms more greatly benefited the rich, rather than those at the bottom of the economic ladder.
Yesterday, as you know, I had an opportunity to meet with the nation's governors, and they all recognize that this program will require some belt-tightening, but many of them also agreed that only if our government grows less will our economy grow more.
The economic policies targeted social and welfare programs, leaving many Americans financially desperate and plunging deeper into poverty. The 40th president not only faced huge problems at home. In the early 1980s, tension between the US and the Soviet Union increased.
If history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
Reagan made it his primary mission to create peace through strength, and in 1985 he found a Soviet leader the US could finally negotiate with, Mikhail Gorbachev. 1987 became a particularly important year for peacemaking. In a visit to West Berlin, Ronald Reagan gave one of his most powerful speeches. The moment inspired hope across a divided nation.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, If you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan and Gorbachev also signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, agreeing to eliminate a weapons class and reduce their nuclear weapons stockpiles. An historic and profound moment on both sides.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is doверяй, no проверяй, trust but verify.
Но значение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
Reagan was one of the Queen's most favoured presidents during her reign. She admired his work for Britain during the Falklands War and awarded him with an honorary knighthood, the highest honour Britain can award a foreigner.
Mr. Reagan, how do you feel to receive this honour? How do you feel to receive this honour?
I feel greatly honored. I can't tell you how much how appreciative and how proud I am of this honor that they got me.
However, the end of Ronald Reagan's presidency showcased huge changes in American society. Inequality was rife, and national debt had tripled. Reagan's politics changed conservatism in America forever. His administration, therefore, became one of the most significant in US history. In 1989, Ronald Reagan's former vice president swore the oath of office.
I will keep America moving forward, always forward, for a better America, for an endless, enduring dream and 1,000 points of light. This is my mission, and I will complete it.
Only 9 months into office, the world changed for good. Americans everywhere watched the Berlin Wall fall and the Soviet Union collapse on their television screens.
And through another hole, another East German takes advantage of the new liberties. After all, 5 New Year's Eve. Anything goes tonight. Bits of the wall are still being chipped out as souvenirs. It's not easy. For the young, the Spartans are the attraction. They'll just know when they're much older that they were here for this historic moment.
Gorbachev resigned, and Bush welcomed a new era of peace. However, foreign policy and military issues did not stop there. As the door on the Cold War closed, a new one opened with Iraq. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Bush reacted by sending 425,000 American troops into Kuwait and encouraged Allied forces to join the fight. After weeks of air and missile bombardment, American and Allied forces defeated the Iraqi army in the 100-hour land battle named Desert Storm. However, whilst concentrating on foreign issues, problems at home began to worsen. The faltering of the economy, violence in inner cities, and continued high-deficit spending meant Bush's popularity was on the turn.
Bill Clinton offers a very old path: more government, more regulation, and more taxes.
The American public soon looked to the Democratic Party for hope in the 1992 election. In 1992, the old guard gave way for the new. Bill Clinton, the first boomer generation president, swaggered through the White House doors.
Today, a generation raised in the shadows of the Cold War assumes new responsibilities in a world warmed by the sunshine of freedom, but threatened still by ancient hatreds and new plagues. Well, my fellow Americans, this is our time. On this day, with high hopes and brave hearts, in massive numbers, the American people have voted to make a new beginning.
Clinton achieved a long list of economic successes. The country saw the lowest unemployment rate in modern times, the lowest inflation rate in 30 years, and the highest home ownership in America's history. The 42nd president also proposed the first balanced budget in decades, and even achieved a budget surplus.
With unemployment and inflation at their lowest levels in 2 decades, businesses and banks healthy and sound, new jobs being created every day, our economy is continuing to grow steady and strong. That's why we have to feel confident and continue our economic strategy.
America was flourishing, and so was Clinton's popularity. Clinton showed much interest in Great Britain and Northern Ireland during his presidency. In 1994, Bill and First Lady Hillary attended the D-Day anniversary in Portsmouth.
Tonight, an unprecedented gathering of heads of state for a glittering dinner at Portsmouth's Guildhall. Leaders of the 14 Allied nations gathering ahead of tomorrow's huge memorial service attended by 12,000 Normandy veterans. Organisers like General Eisenhower hopeful that clearing skies may provide a smooth crossing for another D-Day armada.
A year later, Clinton returned to the British Isles to visit Northern Ireland. The 42nd president made it a priority to try and ease tensions and troubles in Belfast and Londonderry.
It has internationalised the issue in a way which was not, I suppose, possible. The British tried to internalise this all the time. But really, at the end of the day, and I think the President made this point yesterday, it's up to the two governments. And the British government is the one with jurisdiction in this part of the island. It's up to John Major. And when the President goes back to the USA, John Major needs to emulate the example which he has been set.
To this day, his visit to Northern Ireland remains one of his proudest foreign policy achievements.
Know the words, how this city welcomes its guests, as we invite to the platform the President and the First Lady of Hillary Clinton. Well, my friends, I believe we live in a time of hope and history rhyming. Standing here in front of the Guildhall, Looking out over these historic walls, I see a peaceful city, a safe city, a hopeful city, full of young people that should have a peaceful and prosperous future here where their roots and families are. That is what I see today with you.
Bill Clinton's era of prosperity would come tumbling down in 1998. White House intern Monica Lewinsky claimed to have had sexual relations with the president over an 18-month period. Their sexual relationship began in 1995, when Lewinsky was 22 years old and Clinton 49. When the news report first released, Clinton denied the allegations to the media and in court. Lewinsky refused to testify.
I have to go back to work on my State of the Union speech, and I worked on it till pretty late last night. But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
There will not be a cover-up. There will not be an abuse of power in this office. And there is no credible charge that I violated any law, even way back in the dark ages or years ago when this happened. If I did something wrong, it will come out in the special counsel. They will find the truth. Let them do it.
But on July the 28th, 1998, Lewinsky received transactional immunity in exchange for grand jury testimony. She then turned over a semen-stained blue dress to investigators, which the FBI matched to the president's DNA. Clinton now had nowhere to hide.
As you know, in a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong.
Congress led trials against the president for obstruction of justice and perjury. However, after a 21-day trial, Clinton was acquitted and remained in office. Monica Lewinsky's life has since been wholly defined by her sexual relations with the president. The trial and revelations changed American political analysis forever. A president's personal life is now as much on the media radar as their policies. George W. Bush's presidency started and ended with controversy.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
This is no longer an election. This is like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, we just get stranger and stranger, as Alice said.
I've been thinking this is just the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. How they could get it, how it could be given to one, taken back. Now, oh, we're not sure again. Just the back and forth, not sure. It's bizarre.
From his dubious 2000 election right up to the Great Recession in 2008, Bush faced many barriers during his political journey. His two-term presidency still attracts analysis and media attention, nearly 15 years later.
She loved her doll very much. See her little doll? What bird is that cries jay? You know, the blue jay. Soon she who was alone said to her doll, "The shaman will go off alone to the top of the hill to listen for the words of the Great Spirit. Then we'll know what to do, so that once more the rains will come."
The real challenge of Bush's presidency came on the 11th of September 2001.
I saw the plane exactly going into the building. I was standing right there on 100 Church Street. You gotta be quiet.
Get out of the street. Boom. Get out of the street.
On page 153. At the count of 3, everyone should be on page.
The 9/11 terrorist attacks rocked the nation and sent shockwaves across the world.
It's difficult to find the words to describe the feeling in New York City today. New York City is in shock. One of its most famous landmarks destroyed, thousands dead, and America is under siege.
His father, George Bush Sr., declared that his son faced the greatest challenge of any president since Abraham Lincoln.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
President Bush stepped up to the crisis and provided the American people with clear leadership. He refused to hide away in a bunker and insisted on returning to the White House on the night of the attacks.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens.
Bush's actions and powerful messages resulted in him becoming the most popular president in the history of polling, reaching a 90% approval rating in the immediate period after 9/11. Soon after, the 43rd president declared a war on terror, and Britain soon joined the US in an air campaign against Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda.
Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. This group and its leader, a person named Osama bin Laden, are linked to many other organizations in different countries, including the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries.
The war in Afghanistan eventually became the longest military conflict in US history, lasting from 2001 to 2021.
Our message to them is clear. No matter how long it takes, America will find you, and we will bring you to justice.
This, of course, is a moment of the utmost gravity for the world. None of the leaders involved in this action want war. None of our nations want it. We are a peaceful people. The murder of almost 7,000 innocent people in America was an attack on our freedom, our way of life, an attack on civilized values the world over. We waited so that those responsible could be yielded up by those shielding them. That offer was refused. We have now no choice. So we will act, and our determination in acting is total. We will not let up or rest until our objectives are met in full.
He vowed to protect the Western world from attacks by any means necessary. However, his controversial invasion of Iraq in 2003 caused much uproar.
There's no doubt in my mind, no doubt in my mind, we'll bring Al-Qaeda to justice, peace or no peace in the Middle East.
The US and coalition forces invaded Iraq on March 19, 2003, due to concerns about dictator Saddam Hussein and the development of weapons of mass destruction. Over 4,000 Americans died in the war over the next 8 years. Public support and Bush's popularity massively dropped over the period of conflict. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. In his last year, Bush's popularity diminished, and a huge financial crisis began to take grip of the US.
I know Americans are concerned about the adjustments that are taking place in our financial markets. The White House and throughout my administration, we're focused on them. And we're working to reduce disruptions and minimize the impact of these financial market developments on the broader economy.
A catastrophic end to a rocky presidency for Mr. George W. Bush. In 2008, Barack Obama's dream of becoming president came true.
Ah!
Oh, your hair was in front of your face. Gotta do it again.
Fired up! Fired up! Ready to go! Ready to go! Fired up! Fired up! Ready to go! Ready to go! Go! Fired up! Ready to go! Woo!
As the first African-American president, the significance of his victory cannot be underestimated. A feeling of elation, excitement, and hope spread far and wide.
Did you not think it could happen?
I never thought in my lifetime that it would happen. But it happened tonight. It's a reality and we did it. America is now more united. We did it.
Because I can't believe that I got the opportunity to live to see something so great. Like, I can't describe it. I can't believe I got the chance to vote for the first black president.
Slavery and racial abuse have haunted America's national identity for hundreds of years. Obama's election to the White House therefore changed history forever. A new dawn broke on the United States of America.
There's new energy to harness, new jobs to be created, new schools to build, and threats to meet, alliances to repair. The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. We may not get there in 1 year or even in one term. But America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there.
The 43rd President, George W. Bush, left Obama with a once-in-a-lifetime financial crisis. The 2008 recession needed urgent attention, and Obama soon began work on building an Economic Recovery Act, which would save millions of Americans' jobs and invest heavily in infrastructure. The Recovery Act cost nearly $800 billion, more than the government had spent on any package of programs ever.
We can choose hope over fear, unity over division, change over the status quo.
One of Obama's key beliefs was equality. This belief translated into his actions on health care. In his first term, Obama signed a legislation establishing health care as a fundamental right and increasing the affordability and accessibility for all Americans.
I think the really interesting question is why it is that my friends in the other party have made the idea of preventing these people from getting health care their holy grail, their number one priority. The one unifying principle in the Republican Party at the moment is making sure that 30 million people don't have health care.
Obamacare would become one of the most significant pieces of social legislation in American history. But with radical change comes backlash, and many conservative Americans took to the streets to protest.
An important part of the Affordable Care Act takes effect tomorrow, no matter what Congress decides to do today.
Control of our lives, undermines our liberty, and it certainly doesn't make anybody happy. We're going to kill the bill!
The 44th president became one of the most well-liked political leaders across the world during his time in office. And as Elizabeth's 12th president, he certainly charmed the British monarch. Obama visited the Queen on several occasions, with a private meeting at Buckingham Palace in 2009, a state banquet in 2011, and lunch at Windsor Castle in 2016 for Her Majesty's birthday.
Today, the United States remains our most important ally, and our two nations contribute to the security and prosperity of our peoples and of the world through shared national interests.
The Queen even kept asking palace officials to invite the Obamas back to visit after he left office, a sign he made a great impression on Elizabeth II. In 2016, the country as a whole would move further and further to the right in political feeling. A media frenzy swarmed around Republican candidate Donald J. Trump, and a new period for American politics appeared on the horizon.
I've never said I'm a perfect person, nor pretended to be someone that I'm not.
We now have the chance to elect a 45th president who will build on our progress. who will finish the job, who already has the respect of leaders around the world and the people they serve, who is smart and who is steady and who is tested.
Celebrity businessman Trump defeated Democrat candidate Hillary Clinton in one of the most heated elections in recent history.
We will make America great again.
And while the campaign is over, our work on this movement is now really just beginning.
Trump oversaw numerous controversial and divisive policies. He increased aggressive border and immigration control, demanding a wall to be built between Mexico and the US. This policy particularly fueled racism from the far right in America.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
With economic policy, the president signed a major tax reform bill and put tariffs on foreign steel and aluminium. He also became the first US president to meet with a North Korean leader. In 2018, he held a summit with Kim Jong-un, and images of the historic moment spread far and wide across the world.
Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs.
The real test of his presidency, however, arrived on the 20th of January 2020. The first confirmed case of COVID-19 was reported in the US, and Trump became consumed with the coronavirus pandemic for the rest of his presidency.
Going to do anything rash or hastily. I don't do that. But the country wants to get back to work. Our country was built to get back to work. We don't have a country where they say, hey, let's close it down for 2 years. We can't do that. It's not our country. And we were attacked like nothing that's happened possibly since 1917, many, many years ago. We were attacked. And we're winning the battle, and we're going to win the war, and it's not going to take, hopefully, that much longer, but we have to win the war. After consulting with our top government health professionals, I have decided to take several strong but necessary actions to protect the health and well-being of all Americans. To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days.
Despite the country developing 2 vaccines, President Trump's response to the pandemic was delayed and did not encourage practices to reduce the spread. The president used bizarre and reckless rhetoric in live addresses, even at one point advising the public to inject bleach to fight the virus.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that? By injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
Democrats viewed Trump's pandemic response as a catastrophic disaster and the tip of the iceberg of a controversial presidency. over 400,000 Americans had died of COVID, and Trump's time in the White House was running out. As former vice president to Obama, Joe Biden stood for the Democratic candidacy in the 2020 election.
We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious. But this will not be my victory alone or our victory alone. It'll be a victory for the American people, for our democracy, for America. And there will be no blue states and red states when we win. Just the United States of America.
With COVID-19, economic problems and division, Biden stood to unite the country. He vowed to rebuild the middle class, combat climate change, and create a more racially equal society. His promises spoke to the American people. After 4 years of the Trump administration's scandals and controversies, Americans voted to put Biden in the White House. But Biden's Republican opponent had a thirst for power. Trump would not go down without a fight.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
In January 2020, he incited supporters to storm the Capitol building and protest the election result.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
You're traitors! You're traitors!
And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
A dark day for the United States. News of the riots spread across the world, and the UK watched in horror from across the Atlantic. The 2020 election quickly proved to be the most fraught in American history. In 2021, President Biden traveled to Europe to meet the EU, NATO, and the G7. The Queen invited the Bidens for tea at Windsor Castle during the visit. The occasion, only 2 months after Prince Philip's death, held much significance for the monarch, and Biden empathized with the Queen's loss. Without knowing it, however, Biden would be Her Majesty's last US president.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her reign lasted for 70 years, from post-war austerity and the end of empire through the expansion of the Commonwealth. She helped preserve the institution of the monarchy during times of massive social change. At her coronation, the Queen repeated her pledge to serve her people and fulfilled it throughout her reign with a combination of skill and a sense of duty.
A wave of grief spread across Britain, the Commonwealth, and the world as a whole. President Biden led the period of mourning and condolence messages in the United States.
She was the same in person as her image. Decent, honorable, and all about service.
The Bidens also traveled across the Atlantic to pay respects at the great monarch's funeral. All of the living US presidents recounted their time spent with the Queen and honored her life of service, duty, and devotion to her people.
She gave me a look that only a mother could give a child.
The death of Queen Elizabeth II closed the door on a long line of American presidents. 14 US leaders came and went in the time one woman sat on the British throne. Through the Elizabethan age, we can witness vast changes to America and the world. From the end of the Second World War to the moon landings, the fall of the Berlin Wall, to the first ever African-American president. There will never be another reign quite like Elizabeth II's, nor a monarch quite so admired by the American people.